A while ago, Bill told me check the sermon suggestion box. There are some suggestions in there, and one of them was David and Goliath. That's a good subject. I think too often what we do with stories like David and Goliath is that we relegate them to the children and think they're just a good children's story and that they don't have application to all of us. The background picture I have here is of the Valley of Elah. If you look at that and you look to your right, that is where the Philistines were arrayed on the valley, and to the left is where Israel was. At the bottom of the hill or mountain on the left is a creek. That creek, if I remember right, runs all the way to the city of Gath. When we went to see the Valley of Elah, we went from the Valley of Elah to the Mound of Gath. It's about 7 miles. But I want you to have this place in mind because I think one of the things I gained from going to Israel and seeing these places is that it's a reminder that these are not fairy tales that we're reading about, but they happened with real people and real places. The story of David and Goliath is one of the most beloved of the entire Bible. One person I looked at in talking about this said, I think preachers don't talk about this very much because they're afraid that someone has told this story and done it so well that they're afraid that when they speak on this subject, they will fail. I don't feel that way. That people have heard a lot. And we have heard about it a lot. We sing, we love it. We sing about it. We sing one of them, The Battle Belongs to the Lord. It's taken from 1 Samuel 17. Our children love this story and want to hear it repeatedly. I can tell you as a boy growing up, I wanted to hear it. It was great. I didn't know the Bible had stories about slaying giants in it. But we'll revisit it today, but we should consider a lesson from the story that we may have overlooked. Bishop Westcott said that great occasions do not make heroes or cowards. They simply unveil them to the eyes of men. And the story of David and Goliath reveals who among Israel was a hero and who was a coward. And we should consider this lesson today because God will not save cowards. Revelation 21 verse 8 says, But the cowardly shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. It wasn't talking about me being brave in an army. It was talking about me being in the greatest of all conflicts, and that conflict is for the cross of Christ. And this was said to people undergoing persecution to remind them that if they didn't remain faithful, they would be in the lake which burns with fire, which is the second death. And so we should take from today's lesson that when we are cowardly, it's saying that I don't trust God. That I am afraid to confront the giants who are opposing us. When we come to this story, we find this is after King Saul has been rejected. The Spirit of the Lord is at the Valley of Elah. Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle, and they were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and encamped between Soko and Azekah. And Hebrew means boundary of blood. So this is the Philistines have encroached on the territory that belongs to Judah. And the way that the people refer to it is there's a boundary line between us and the Philistines, and only at that place blood is spilled. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah and drew up in line of battle against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side with a valley between them. The Philistines, I don't think, really wanted to go to battle any more than Israel did. And so they chose a champion to go out and to challenge Israel. And what they propose is that let's just let our champions, you take the best one that you take the best man you have, and we'll take the best man that we have, and let's let them fight it out. Well, the Philistines have quite the champion. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs and a javelin of bronze strung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and his shield bearer went before him. The Philistine champion is Goliath. Now I'm telling you, this is a giant of a man. He is 9.5 feet tall. And he is not one of these bean poles. He is a filled out man. He had a bronze helmet of unspecified weight. When I went to Ireland, Boy and I visited a castle, and they allowed us to put on the armor of a knight. Let me tell you, a bronze helmet is heavy. I couldn't tell you how much it weighs, but it's more than 10 pounds. But if that was not enough, when ancient people went into battle, they would make a coat of mail. And a coat of mail are little tiny ringlets all woven together to cover you from your shoulders down to about mid-calf. Some of them, in the Middle Ages, they tried to take it all the way down to your ankles. Let me tell you, I don't know how they moved in that. It was incredibly heavy. It says that Goliath's coat of mail weighed about 121 pounds. Let me see how well you do if I put a coat of metal on you that weighs about 121 pounds. How freely would you move? And if that's not enough, it says his spear had the shaft of a weaver's beam. I couldn't find an example of that, but I'm thinking it's pretty big. But if that doesn't get you, on the end of that spear, his spearhead weighed 14.5 pounds. And this guy has got a javelin of solid bronze slung over his shoulder, in addition to his sword. It's no wonder that he had a man walk in front of him with his shield. Now, the Philistines proposed that if Goliath wins, Israel must become their servant. Notice, Goliath comes out and he stands in this valley and he shouts. You can almost picture it. He walks across the valley and he goes over to the Israel side and he shouts to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? This is a waste of time. Am I not a Philistine? And are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." Now I want you to think about something. This is not a one-day event. It's not a two-day event. We read in verse 16 that for 40 days, this Philistine came forward, took his stand, and he challenged them twice a day, morning and evening. Can you imagine that? Being out there for 6 weeks. You know, the text says that they went and battled. If they had any battles at all, it was probably skirmishes. But for the most part, both sides are just standing there. And Goliath comes out every day for 6 weeks. Why didn't Israel respond to it? In fact, they should have responded to it. Goliath comes out and says, "I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." When people used to fight in hand-to-hand combat, what they would do is they would yell insults at each other over and over. And the whole idea was, I'm going to make you mad enough to come after me. But there was also implied in those insults that if I do get a hold of you, it's not going to be good. Why didn't Israel go out there? When Saul, notice this, Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. King Saul's army is terrified. And where did that come from? It came from their leader, their king. He was afraid, dismayed and afraid of one man. But we'll see here that David has more faith than Saul and his army. Now, David wasn't at this battle when it first started, and he wasn't there for this 6 weeks of taunting. David's father sent him to the army camp with supplies for his brothers and a bribe for the leader of the thousands. He sent him with 10 cheeses. They must have been good. That's so he would look after his sons in the battle. And you'll remember that David's oldest brothers were there. Eliab, the oldest. The first 3 oldest were there, and the text tells us that David was the youngest, and he went back and forth. You remember in chapter 16, David sometimes went and played the harp for Saul to soothe him. But David would go home and look after his father's sheep. Now, David does do exactly what his father asked, and he goes up. In fact, he runs from the baggage, which is kind of a slam on Saul. Remember when Saul was appointed king, he hid in the baggage. But David comes, brings these supplies for his brothers, and leaves them with the baggage and runs up to the line. And as he talked with his brothers, behold, the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, came up out of the ranks of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before. And David heard him. That's amazing. The first thing that comes up about David is David doesn't wonder if I should go up to the front lines. He runs up there. And he talks to his brothers. And we learn in verse 24 that all the men of Israel, when they saw this man that David heard, fled from him and were much afraid. You can almost picture what's going on here. That day after day we watch Goliath, And I'm telling you, how does fear work in you? That fear only gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Like, is Saul going to pick one of us and just send us down there? I hope it's not me. I mean, have you seen that guy? He's huge. But David, he's kind of perplexed. He starts talking to people and he's asking, well, what will King Saul do for the person who defeats Goliath? That's a pretty good deal. Whoever defeats Goliath, it says in the text, he will be free in all Israel. What does that mean? Well, it means he's going to be free from taxes, the king's taxes. And so whoever wins this battle will never, he and his family will never have to pay taxes to the king again. And you get to marry the king's daughter. You get to be the son-in-law of the king. Sound like a deal? Ready to run down there and fight Goliath? So far, Saul hasn't been able to get anyone to take him up on that offer. But what motivates David when he hears this? And David said to the men who stood by him, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine? And I want you to notice what he says here, and takes away the reproach from Israel. Why does David think that there is reproach on Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? The terminology that David uses here is very interesting because he doesn't say, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that defies the army of Saul? He doesn't say, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that defies the army of Israel? How does he see the army of Israel? Who is he that he should defy the armies of the living God? You know this text is true because of what comes next. Sibling rivalry. Look at verses 28 through 30 with me. 28 through 30. Now, Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, why have you come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. And David said, what have I done now? Was it not but a word? And he turned away from him and toward another and spoke in the same way, and the people answered him again as before. What's going on here? I'm the oldest brother in my family. If I wouldn't fight the bully, but my brother would, and he makes noise about it and tells everyone, I'll beat him up. How does that make me feel? I might be ashamed. Would you just go home and leave me alone? I mean, you little runt, if you go out there and do it, what does that make me look like? But I have to say, the text says that Eliab is part of this whole group that's afraid and dismayed and won't do anything about it. And so what we see here is that David, in the face of opposition, displays more faith in God than in Israel's. And David displays more faith in God than King Saul had. And I hate to say this, because 2 chapters earlier, Jonathan had so much faith that he led an assault on the Philistines, but now this fear has infected him, and not even Jonathan won't go down and take on Goliath. But David's question is relayed to King Saul, and he is brought before the king because David has decided in his heart to challenge Goliath, believing that God will deliver him. Look at verse 32. And I want you to think, David trusted God with his whole heart. When the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and he sent for him. Man's heart fail because of him, your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Now Saul's waited for somebody to come into the king's tent and tell him this. Now, guys, this is not a 12-year-old. This is an 18-year-old boy. I say boy. We tend to say 18-year-old young man. But compared to what David is saying he can do, he is a boy. Do you remember Samuel was kind of shocked that it was David? He looked at Eliab and David's other brothers and thought, surely one of these guys are going to be king. And the short red-haired kid with an acne problem, watching the sheep, is the one that God has chosen to be his next king. A man who has a heart like God's. And notice what Saul says to him. You're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth. Well, if you're thinking like the world, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Some 18-year-old that's going to go out and be the champion of Israel and fight Goliath? But notice verses 34 through 37 again from our scripture reading. David had confidence, not in himself. We'll see who he had confidence in. But David said to Saul, your servant used to keep sheep for his father. What's that got to do with being a warrior? And when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. Now, that's pretty brave in and of itself. That when a lion, David probably could take his sling or his staff and beat on that bear or lion until he let go of it. But notice what else he says. And if he arose against me, that means he has turned on him, and now David is the target of the lion or the bear. I caught him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Can you think about that a minute? I don't know of a time in my life I would have ever thought, I'm going to grab a lion with my bare hands or a bear with my bare hands and try to kill him. I know what I would have done. If it's a bear, lie down, play dead. It's probably the right thing to do with a lion because you're not going to run away from a lion. It's not going to happen. Now look at what he says in verse 36. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God. David said, and this is really important, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. Does David think that he has some kind of special power in and of himself, that he can kill lions and bears? Or that somehow he's going to be smarter than Goliath? No. David has faith because he looks back on his life and goes, when I went against lions and bears, who helped me? God. And if he would help me with a lion or a bear, he'll help me with this uncircumcised Philistine. He's saying, look, that guy's not even part of God's kingdom. And if I go against him, and I am part of God's kingdom, and he helped me with little things like killing lions and bears, I think I can handle Goliath. And Saul was like, well, to David, go and the Lord be with you. It's not quite that simple, but think about this. God had helped him defeat lions and bears to protect his father's sheep. David is going to be king of Israel, and what is he trying to do? Protect God's sheep. God helped him kill lions and bears with his bare hands. And God, David believes this with all his heart, will help me kill this uncircumcised Philistine. David is a very logical man. If God delivered him from lions and bears, he's sure that God can deliver him from Goliath. Now Saul attempts to prepare David for the battle. Saul's not an unthinking man. He's like, okay, you're going to go out there and fight with this man of war. So Saul says, here, put my armor on. Now, if you only know this text pretty well, you're going to laugh at this. When Saul was described head and shoulders taller than all the other men in Israel. So now I want you to get this picture in your head. This large man tries to put his helmet on David. And he gives David his coat of mail and his sword. And David starts trying to move around in this. I mean, I'm wondering, like, is that coat of mail, like on Saul, it came to his knees, and on David, it's down to his ankles, and he's trying to move around in it? David decides to forego the armor and use the weapons he is familiar with, his sling and his staff. Now, kids, I want you to look at this. This is the picture of the stream at the base of the mountain that David comes down. Think about this. David walks down the hill toward the brook that runs through the valley of Elah. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in his shepherd's pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. I wish you could see this picture better, but there are very few. We went to Masada. We saw what the Romans used in their slings. They called them bullets. They used stones about that big. That's a lot bigger than, in my mind, a stone. It's not quite a full rock, but I think of it closer to a rock. David goes down there and he kneels down in this creek and he picks out 5 stones of that size and puts them in his shepherd's pouch. And I want you to kind of get this picture in your mind that he's got his sling and it's hanging down here and he's holding his staff. Then he walks out into the valley in the full view of Goliath. Now, just Try to be like Goliath for a minute. You're 9.5 that Israel is going to send down to you. He's probably thinking, probably the biggest man they've got somewhere around Saul's size. Maybe 6 feet tall. And he walks out right in the full view of Goliath, and Goliath sees David, and he's insulted that Israel sends a shepherd to fight with him. He says, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" He's looking at that staff, and he's thinking, where's your sword? Combat, and all you've got is a shepherd's staff. And he's like, are you nuts? You think I'm some kind of dog that you can just beat off with your stick? Goliath is sure that he will make short work of David. He says, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the field." Faster you come, the faster this is over. But David, he's got some words for Goliath. Remember, I told you, in ancient combat, the thing to do was to trade insults before you actually get into the fight. David says to Goliath, "You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." David comes down and he announces to Goliath, "I got God on my side." And he's like, there's no weapon that you made that can defeat God. None. Now David says, who's really going to get beaten by vultures and wild beasts? Notice what it says in verse 46. "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines." Now, he has upped it, folks. Remember, Goliath just said, they'll eat your body. David says, no, the Lord will deliver you, and I will cut off your head in front of the whole army of the Philistines, and I will give the dead bodies of the host, the whole army of the Philistines, this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves not with sword and spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. Well, you could say the Philistines are part of it, but they're going to die. What David wants is he wants the armies of the God of Israel to know that it doesn't matter how the other side is armed, because the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. Goliath got up to fight David at these words. Now I want this picture. Sometimes I think we're plagued by the fact that we've watched too many videos and too much online stuff. Your imagination needs to go to what's about to happen now. David, sees Goliath start to move toward him. He doesn't back up. David runs toward Goliath. And while he's running, he's reaching into his shepherd's pouch, and he puts that stone in, and he begins to sling around. And he lets go, and that stone sinks right into Goliath's forehead. First shot. Now imagine Goliath just on the ground. And both sides are dead quiet. The Philistines, in stunned silence, watch as David continues to run toward Goliath's prostrate body. And when he gets there, he runs over to him and stands over him. And do you know what he does? He walks up to Goliath's body. And he walks over, and here he is laying on the ground. Goliath never even got a chance to pull his sword. David reaches down and pulls that sword out of the sheath. And the Philistines are watching, probably wondering, is he just stunned? David runs that sword through him, then pulls that thing out and cuts off his head. And just get the picture in your head that David lulls up the head of Goliath and shows it to the Philistines. And the men of Israel and Judah rose with a shout and pursued the Philistines as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron, so that the wounded Philistines fell on the way from Sha'arim as far as Gath and Ekron. I want you to know, when you come out of the valley of Elah, you go through a little tiny mountain pass toward Gath. On the side where they have to go through that pass. Got a picture in your head? All the Israelites running down the mountain as the Philistines are trying to get out of there? The Israel army that was scared to death finally rises as the army of God and chases the Philistines for about 7 miles. And they are killing and hacking as they go. This verse is really interesting to me. Verse 54. Israel doesn't have Jerusalem at this battle. But I want you to get in your head that David takes Goliath's head down. And outside the gates of Jerusalem, he puts that head on a pike and sticks it on the road. I wonder what that young man had in his mind. One day this will be my capital. And I just want these people to know that the Lord has given me victory over the Philistine giant. Guess what will happen when I come to see you? David trusted God with his whole heart. There was no cowardice in David at all. And it wasn't a false bravery. It was a bravery built on his full, complete trust in God and a relationship that he had had with him where he had seen God deliver him from near disaster before. So what we can see in this story is that King Saul's cowardice infected Israel's army. Don't be cowards. If any of us are cowards, you know what that can do to the rest of the group? Infect them with cowardice. Israel's army became so Are we so afraid of what might happen to us that we don't complete the Lord's work? And think of those who displayed cowardice in this story. David's brothers, As far as I know, all of them will become officers in David's army one day. Jonathan. Saul's fear infected his son. And I have to tell you, the most noble character outside of David and 1 Samuel is Jonathan. Even the bravest people can be infected by the fear of others. Only David, whom God said is a man after my heart and who will do all my will, shows courage. His courage was predicated on experience with God. Through God's watch care, he was able to kill lions and bears, and through God's watch care, he was able to defeat this giant. David's faith gave him the courage to fight against those who defied God. Are we as upset as David was at people defying God? Or are we cowards in the face of opposition to God and his people? If there is one singular lesson to take from today, I think it's that which is at the end of Scripture. But the cowardly shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. I hope you can see that this is not a kid's story. This has application to me and to you. I'm afraid that what keeps some people from obeying God is fear and cowardice. One of the things I usually encounter when someone finds out what is required to be saved is that, well, I don't know what my family would say about that if I obeyed. Maybe if you obey, they will follow suit. This is putting trust in God that if I do the right thing, God will help me. If we've been infected with fear here, let's repent of that. There's a lot of things that we need to be doing. One of them is teaching the lost. When Jody died, there's something that's gone undone. Who's calling and checking on Becky or Kathleen? Or Louise? Or Lauren? Those are things that need to be done, and I can tell you as a has to force myself to do it, calling people. You're always afraid how they're going to react, especially if you haven't called them in a while. But have the courage to do it. Who's on your side? God. Let's be like David. Let's not be like Saul. If we can help you in any way, please come as together we stand and sing.